Welcome back to Semper Fi. In today's episode, which we've titled Adjusting Cells, we dive into the profound changes that Brooke and Winston Campbell face following Winston's life-altering injuries. As they navigate this new reality, their roles and relationship evolved, underscoring the resilience and adaptation required, not just in body, but in spirit and heart. When we left, Brooke had just received the news of Winston's severe injuries. Today, we explore the aftermath as Brooke steps into her role as a full-time caregiver, a transition filled with challenges that test their vows and fortitude. Brooke knew the conversation with Vanny and Sammy about their father's injuries was inevitable. The twins had been shielded from the harsher realities of Winston's condition. But as his return home grew nearer, Brooke understood they needed to grasp the changes in a way that their young minds could process. She planned to speak to them on a sunny Saturday morning, a time when the house felt lighter and their moods were generally buoyant from the weekend freedom. Sitting down at their small, sunlit kitchen table where crayon marks still testified to recent artwork, Brooke gathered both boys to her sides. She spoke gently, her words carefully chosen for clarity and warmth. "Boys, you know how Daddy has been away because he got hurt when helping other people, right?" She watched their nods, their faces open and attentive. "Well, Daddy's coming home soon, but some things about him have changed. It's important we talk about it, so we know how to help him." Manuel's brow furrowed slightly, his voice a whisper of concern. "Is Daddy still Daddy?" Samuel looked on, his hand finding his brother's, their twin bond a silent strength between them. Brooke smiled, squeezing their hands reassuringly. "Yes, sweetie, Daddy is still Daddy. He loves us just the same. But he got a big owie. He lost one of his legs, which means he won't be able to run or walk the same way he used to. He'll use a wheelchair to help him move around the house and go places with us." Sam's eyes widened with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Like the superheroes we see on TV?" he asked, trying to fit his father's new reality into a world of comic book heroes. "Yes, just like the superheroes," Brooke replied, grateful for the innocence of their understanding. "Daddy is like a superhero now. He has new gadgets to help him, like his wheelchair, and special tools to pick things up where he can't bend over. He's going to be different, but we can have fun learning about all the new things with him." Manuel leaned in, his voice low and fierce. "Can we help Daddy with his superhero tools?" His eagerness to be involved, to do something, anything, was evident. Brooke nodded, her heart swelling with pride and sorrow at the readiness to support. "Absolutely. You'll both be Daddy's superhero helpers. We're all going to help together. We're all going to learn together to help Daddy with his new challenges. It will be a team effort." She went on to explain a little bit about PTSD, but she was careful to assure them that sometimes Daddy might seem sad or distant and that it wasn't their fault. "It's like when you remember falling off your bike and feeling scared to ride again," Brooke explained. "Daddy might have some scary memories that make him really sad or quiet. All we need to do is be there. Maybe give him a hug or just sit with him or show him we love him." By the end of the conversation, the twins seemed thoughtful but resilient, their innate adaptability as children shining through. Brooke felt a cautious relief. They understood as much as children their age could, and they were ready to welcome their father home with open arms and open hearts. As Winston's homecoming approached, the reality of his needs became increasingly apparent. Brooke, overwhelmed yet determined, knew that their home must undergo several modifications to accommodate Winston's wheelchair and new lifestyle. Understanding the magnitude of this task, she reached out to friends and family for help, not only to ease the financial burden, but also to foster a community effort that would make Winston's transition as smooth as possible. One sunny Saturday morning, Brooke's backyard buzzed with activity, a tangible hum of community spirit. Friends, neighbors, and relatives, some of whom Brooke hadn't seen in months, turned up with tools in hand, ready to work. The project was spearheaded by Brooke's brother Alex, who had some experience in construction. He had drawn up simple plans that included widening the doorways, installing ramps at both the front and the back doors, and remodeling the bathroom to be accessible. As the sound of power tools filled the air, Brooke watched with gratitude. Her father and a couple of neighbors worked on installing the ramp at the front entrance, measuring and cutting wood with practiced precision. Inside, her best friend Julia and a few other volunteers removed doors from their hinges to widen the frames. The atmosphere was one of barn raising, everyone contributing what skills and labor they could to support a beloved member of their community. The bathroom required significant changes, which included installing a roll-in shower, grab bars, and a higher toilet with support features. Winston's former Army buddy, Mike, who now ran a plumbing business, took charge of this, donating not only his time, but all of the fixtures required. "It's the least I can do for a brother in arms," he said, his voice thick with unspoken emotion. In the kitchen, adjustments were more subtle, but no less important. Lowered countertops and a pull-out pantry were added, features that would allow Winston to participate in family meals and activities, something Brooke knew would be vital for his mental recovery and sense of independence. By the end of the weekend, the house had transformed significantly, not just in the physical layout, but in its essence. It was no longer just a building. It was a testament to the power of community, a physical manifestation of love and support. Winston wasn't returning just to a modified home, but to a home vibrantly enforced by the bonds of family and friendship. As the last tool was packed away and the final piece of debris swept up, Brooke gathered everyone in the backyard. With heartfelt thanks, she expressed her gratitude, her eyes glistening with tears. "This house is full of more than just new fixtures and ramps," she said. "It's filled with your kindness, effort, and love. You'll all give Winston the greatest welcome home gift imaginable." That day, as the sun set and the volunteers shared a well-earned meal together, they laughed and stories flowed. The project had not only changed the structure of the house, but had also rebuilt and strengthened the community around Winston and Brooke, reminding them that no matter the challenges ahead, they wouldn't face them alone. Several months after Winston's return, Brooke found a quiet evening to broach a conversation that had been weighing on her heart. The children were asleep, and the house was silent, save for an occasional distant sound of a car passing by. She approached Winston, who was in the living room. Staring thoughtfully out the window, she took a seat beside him, her hand finding his. "Winston," Brooke began, her voice soft but firm, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about all the changes we're going through." Winston turned to look at her, his expression somber. "I know," he replied, his voice steady. "It's been a lot for both of us. I feel like everything's changed since I got back." Brooke nodded, squeezing his hand gently. "It has, and I want to make sure you're okay. I want to make sure we're okay, not just as caregivers or parents, but as a couple." Winston's gaze drifted away momentarily, reflecting on her words. "It's hard, Brooke. I'm not the man I was, and I know that changes things for you too. I can't do many of the things we used to do together. I feel like I'm often more of a burden than a husband." "You're not a burden. Never think that. Yes, things have changed. You've changed, but that doesn't lessen who you are to me. It's just our marriage has shifted. It's more about care and support now, less about the partnership we used to have. And I miss that. I miss us. Winston looked back at her, his eyes meeting hers earnestly. I miss us too. I miss being able to be your partner in a way I used to be. But I'm still here, Brooke. I still love you. More than ever. Brooke felt a tear slide down her cheek as she listened to his words. I love you too, so much. I think we need to find new ways to connect, not just through caregiving and routines. We need to find our new normal together. There are things I still can do, and I want to make sure I'm doing them, Winston added, his voice growing stronger. Maybe we can start having date nights again at home. We could watch movies, play games, talk more. I want to make sure you feel loved and appreciated, not just as my caregiver, but as my wife. Brooke smiled, a glimmer of hope lighting up her features. I'd like that, she said. Let's make a pact to keep our marriage alive, to keep finding ways to love each other, even if they're different from before. Winston nodded, pulling her closer. It's a deal. No matter what, we're in this together. We'll adapt and grow together, and I'm grateful for every day I have with you. Their conversation marked a turning point, a recommitment in their marriage within its context. Both acknowledged the need for ongoing dialogue and adjustment as they navigated the uncharted waters of their changed relationship, finding strength in their bond, altered yet broken. A few weeks later, it was a quiet moment on an ordinary Thursday morning. Brooke felt the solitude creeping in. It had been several months since Winston's return, and the flurry of the initial support, the constant visits, the meals dropped off, frequent check-ins had slowly, almost imperceptibly, begun to ebb. At first, she was too engulfed in her daily necessities of care, too wrapped up in the immediate crisis and adjustments to notice. But as life settled into a new rhythm, the silence grew louder, the gaps wider. Brooke sat at the kitchen table, her coffee cooling unnoticed as she scrolled through her phone. The text messages and calls had dwindled. The last meal bought by a neighbor was 2 weeks past its date in the fridge. She tried to understand, to rationalize the quiet. Everyone has their lives, she told herself. They have their families, their jobs, their routines. It wasn't fair to expect them to understand the depth of daily struggles she now faced. Yet, understanding did not ease the sting of isolation. As she looked around the home that had once buzzed with the laughter and the chatter of friends, now reorganized to accommodate Winston's wheelchair and medical equipment, she felt a pang of loss. Not just for the husband, who had changed so irrevocably, but for the community bond that had seemed so strong and now felt as fragile as the morning mist. Brooke missed the impromptu coffee dates, the casual drop-ins, the sense of being part of a web of lives interconnected. Deciding not to wallow, Brooke reached for her phone with a determined sigh. She dialed the number of a family therapist she had been referred to but hadn't called. Realizing that if the community support wasn't coming back, she needed to build new structures. She needed professional help, not just for Winston, but for herself and for their boys. To navigate this new reality, a reality where she too had to heal and adapt. In making that call, Brooke acknowledged a hard truth. Sometimes support fades, not out of neglect, but because life moves forward for everyone. And as she set the appointment, a small sense of empowerment began to take root amidst the loneliness. It was up to her to seek out and cultivate a new kind of support, one that understood and could sustain the long road ahead. Brooke sat stiffly in a softly lit room, a space designed to feel safe and confidential, where she was about to share her inner turmoil for the first time with a counselor named Dr. Ellis. She had been reluctant to seek help, but after weeks of feeling overwhelmed and isolated, she realized that she couldn't manage everything on her own anymore. Dr. Ellis, a kind-eyed woman with a gentle demeanor, invited Brooke to speak freely, reassuring her that everything discussed was confidential and meant to aid her, not judge her. Brooke, it's okay to be honest about your feelings here. Many find it hard to adjust to new roles in caregiving, especially when it changes the dynamics of a relationship. Dr. Ellis began, her voice soft but encouraging. Taking a deep breath, Brooke nodded. The permission to speak openly, unleashing words she had bottled up inside. I know I feel grateful that Winston is alive and home, but I hate being a caregiver. I hate it, she confessed, her voice cracking slightly under the strain of her admission. I miss being a wife, and I told Winston that. I miss our conversations. They didn't revolve around medication, therapy schedules, or doctor's appointments. I miss lying next to him without worrying if he's in pain or if he needs help just to turn over. Dr. Ellis listened intently, nodding empathetically as Brooke poured out her frustrations and grief. It's completely normal to feel this way. Dr. Ellis assured her after a moment, caregiving can be incredibly demanding, and it's not uncommon to mourn the loss of a relationship as it was before. It doesn't mean you love him any less. It means you are human and you are mourning a loss. Many losses actually, including the spontaneity and the equality of your marriage. Brooke felt tears prick her eyes as she listened to Dr. Ellis articulate the storm of feelings she had struggled to name. How do I do this without losing myself? I feel like I'm always teetering on the edge of a cliff, trying to hold us both up, she admitted, her voice a whisper of desperation. That's a powerful image, Dr. Ellis responded thoughtfully. Let's explore that. It sounds like you're carrying the weight of both your roles, and it's important to find you a counterweight. That starts with setting boundaries and carving out time for yourself. It's not selfish to take a break. It's essential. We also need to explore ways to reconnect with Winston, not just as a caregiver, but as his partner, and you need to be honest with him. Dr. Ellis went on to discuss strategies for self-care that Brooke could integrate into her daily routine, emphasizing the importance of setting these boundaries to prevent caregiver burnout. She suggested joining caregiver support groups, scheduling regular personal time, and finding hobbies or activities that Brooke enjoyed doing before Winston's injury. Let's work on rebuilding the connection with Winston, too. You can still date each other, even if it's at home. Have a movie night, play a game together, or share a hobby. All that's okay. Find laughter again. It's okay to redefine your marriage on terms that acknowledge both your needs and his. As the session drew to a close, Brooke felt a weight lift slightly. It was the first time in months she allowed herself to acknowledge her feelings without guilt. Armed with practical advice and a newfound understanding of her needs, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she could find her way back to joy, both in her marriage and in her life, even within the confines of their new reality. As Brooke stepped out of the counselor's office, she felt a weight lifted, yet another quickly settling in. The candid conversation had been cathartic, but also unsettling, leaving her raw and exposed. Seeking solace and a moment to gather her thoughts, she drove to the nearest liquor store, picked up a bottle of wine before heading to a quiet expanse of the beach. There, with the rhythmic sound of the waves lapping against the shore, Brooke hoped to find a semblance of peace. Sitting alone in the cool sand, wine bottle nestled beside her, Brooke allowed the sounds and the smells of the ocean to envelop her. The vastness of the sea mirrored the expanse of her own turbulent emotions. It was there, lost in thought, that Edward found her. He approached with a friendly smile, asking her if he could share the view. Brooke, usually guarded, felt an unusual urge to welcome the company. Perhaps it was the wine, or maybe the day's confessions had left her needing a new connection, something for herself. Edward was easy to talk to. He had a charming ease about him, and he listened to Brooke with the intensity that made her feel seen and heard in ways she hadn't in months. They talked about everything and nothing: music, the sea, their favorite foods, Gradually, Brooke found herself sharing more personal feelings, touching on her exhaustion and loneliness without diving into too much detail. Edward shared stories of his travels, his work as a photographer, a job that took him to beautiful, remote places. It must be incredible to capture such beauty, to see the world through your lens, Brooke remarked. Genuinely intrigued, Edward nodded, his eyes locking on hers. It's beautiful indeed. But sometimes capturing someone's true essence is even more fulfilling. Like now, for example, trying to imagine how the light would highlight the nuances of your face. You're very photogenic, Brooke. Flushed with the compliment, Brooke felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Here was a man who saw her not as a caregiver or a wife weighed down by responsibilities, but as a woman, vibrant and alive. The conversation, light yet intimate, drifted into the evening. As the sun set, Edward suggested they meet again, to share stories, to capture some of the light in the photos, he said with a wink. Brooke found herself agreeing before she could second-guess the decision. They exchanged numbers, a seemingly innocent gesture that opened a door she hadn't realized she'd been standing in front of. In the days that followed, Brooke and Edward texted frequently. Each message from him brought a surge of excitement, a bright spot in otherwise mundane days. They met again, ostensibly for Edward to show Brooke some of his work, but quickly their meetings became less about photography and more about the connection they were building. The attention Edward gave her felt like a balm to a weary soul, and she found herself drawn into the affair with little resistance. It wasn't just the escape Edward offered, it was a chance to feel like herself again, to feel desired and appreciated, and more than a caregiver. Each stolen moment with him distanced her further from her reality, proving a dangerous but irresistible fantasy. Next time on Semper Fi, we delve into a chapter filled with unexpected twists and emotional revelations. As Brooke navigates the complexities of her new life, a chance encounter at the beach presents her with choices that could redefine her path. Feeling disconnected from her role as a caregiver and yearning for a glimpse of her old self, Brooke finds herself drawn to Edward, a charismatic stranger who offers her a taste of freedom and validation. But as their friendship deepens, Brooke feels moral dilemmas and questions about loyalty, love, and the true meaning of commitment. Caught at a crossroads, will she choose the safety of familiar roads or venture down a path that could lead to new but perilous horizons? Join us as we explore the boundaries of marriage and identity, testing the strength of bonds forged in the heat of shared battles. It's an episode about the choices we face, the secrets we keep, and the unforeseen consequences that can change everything. Are you a caregiver feeling overwhelmed and underappreciated? Do you long for just a moment to yourself? It's time to take a pause with the Take Care Time Respite Box, designed specifically for caregivers like you in mind. Each item in our carefully curated box is chosen to help you relax, rejuvenate, and reconnect with yourself. Luxurious spa products that pamper your body to inspirational reads that uplift your spirit, our respite box is your reminder that taking care of yourself is not just a necessity, it's a priority. Immerse yourself in a warm bath scented with our exclusive bath bombs. Wrap yourself in an ultra-soft throw and lose yourself in the pages of a book that speaks to your heart. With the Take Your Time Respite Box, it's your turn to be taken care of. And because we believe in the power of community, each box gives you access to an online support group where you can connect with other caregivers, share experiences, and find encouragement. You're not alone in this journey, and with the Take Care Time Respite Box, you'll feel supported, cherished, and understood. Order now at takecaretime.com. Give yourself or a caregiver you know the gift of time and care. Order your Take Care Time Respite Box today because everyone deserves a moment to breathe. Do you have an interesting caregiver story that you would like to have told? Please email us at podcast@takecaretime.com. We would love to hear from you. Please note that this episode features reenactments and dramatized details. While in most cases, The exact verbatim dialogue may not be known. All dramatizations are grounded in research. To respect the privacy and confidentiality of individuals involved, names and some identifying details have been changed. Until next week, take care.